I wanted to take a moment or two to expand upon my GNU+Linux adoption video and take this one to talk about what my personal views are on freedom respecting software. Now, I want to make this perfectly clear. I love the ideals of freedom respecting software. I wish it were more prevalent, especially here in the United States. That being said, with the lockdowns the big companies are imposing, and it's not just them, you also have to look at the average consumer. Very few people have heard of this, and as a result, I think that freedom respecting software is not realistic. I'm not saying it couldn't get there, but they have such a long way to go. And with the kinds of roadblocks being imposed by hardware manufacturers, well, I don't know. It's just people use the software without giving it a second thought, especially um, the younger generation. For instance, if you've ever seen those teens react videos on YouTube, go ahead and type in teens react to 90s internet, and you'll notice how for them the internet is as common as turning on a faucet, water, electricity kind of thing. I didn't grow up with the internet. In fact, I didn't necessarily get the internet until I was in high school. We didn't feel it was something needed. These days, that's a whole different ballgame entirely. The internet and the computers that we're on pretty much drive our society these days. And the freedom respecting software proponents would argue that this is all the more need for freedom respecting software. I agree in principle, but I think that in terms of an implementation, again, I just don't think it's realistic. Let me give you my own personal example. I didn't grow up. See, GNU was developed in 1983, and back before 1983, all software was freedom respecting. When 1983 came around and GNU was initially being developed by Dr. Richard Stallman, he said that by that time all software had become proprietary. This was several years before I was born, and as a result, I never knew about freedom respecting software growing up. In fact, I didn't even consider the Macintosh. I always thought the Macintosh was just a school-based computer, and that and that everybody at home ran Microsoft Windows. Case in point, during high school, all the way up through high school until I started my graphics design courses, I was running Windows XP on an old HP Tower. Before that, I ran Windows Millennium, Windows 98, Windows 95, Windows 3.1, and before that, DOS, because we had an old 486 lying around. So I grew up until high school. I spent the bulk of my computer years in Microsoft Windows. I didn't even consider that proprietary software was bad. I think this speaks to the vast majority of consumers. They don't even give it a second thought. As long as they can turn it on, do their Google search, chat with friends, that's all they care about. And those that do know, for instance, the whole Facebook spying business, those that are well aware of it are probably thinking, well, I would like to use something else, but the question is what? See, there's the problem again. We have too many people who are out of the loop that probably wouldn't ditch Facebook. So that's another example. The same goes for freedom respecting software. The saying goes, you can lead a horse to water, but you can't make him drink. I could sit here and talk about freedom respecting software till I'm blue in the face, but I just don't. I don't know about other countries, but at least here in the United States, I just don't see too many people adopting it. Once I was in high school, I started using Mac OS X, and in fact, I still use it to this day. And the main reasons are because the Macintosh, again, I didn't know about freedom respecting software at the time. I didn't know it existed. I didn't know GNU+Linux existed until 7 years ago. And I spent, a good 15 to 20 years of my computing life, in the proprietary software. And you have to look at upcoming generations especially. This is all they're going to know. You can talk about it till they're blue in the face, till you're blue in the face, but unless they are willing to give it a shot, and many people would prefer to have something just work. That's one of the reasons the Google Chromebooks have taken off, is the fact that they want something that just works. Other people need certain software because their companies pretty much dictate it, especially on the Windows side. My first experimentation of GNU, plus then there's the operating system itself. My first experimentation with GNU was back in 2007 with Ubuntu. And this was before Ubuntu signed a deal with Amazon and whatnot, and before they had Unity. But things just did not fall into place like they should have. Wireless worked, but it took some tinkering. Printers didn't work at all. I don't even remember if the sound worked. See, it's things like this. You talk to the average consumer, unless they can get something that literally turns on and works, then they're not going to use it. In my instance, I need screen enlarging software that can not only enlarge the screen, but if I need to,
Bookmarks.
I can have it speak to me on demand. Software like Magic, Zoom Text for Windows, Zoom Text for the Macintosh, they can all do this. And, a lot of the, there are some hardware, Freedom Software supporters that would say, who cares? It's stealing your freedom. You shouldn't be using it. In this instance, I really have to say that I'm sorry, but this is the kind of software, these are tools that I literally need to use the computer. And I'm sure that there are a lot of people in the same boat with other specialized software that they need to get work done in the workplace. They need it to survive. They need it to eat. Freedom-respecting software activists, especially Dr. Stallman, would tell you choose another profession. How can you choose a profession these days that doesn't involve some kind of computing on some kind of level? And in the computer space, the vast majority of desktop operating systems these days are Microsoft Windows and the Apple Macintosh. GNU+Linux is used on the server side, not so much on the client side. I'm not saying that it's not used at all, but if you look at the numbers, they're very small. Now, we go back to my personal needs as somebody with vision loss, and parallel that to specialist software, not just assistive technology, but specialist software in general. I tried Sonar. There were a number of things missing from the built-in accessibility, one of which being cursor enhancement. I had a double cursor effect. Now, I've been running this in a virtual machine because I was testing Windows 8 back before it came out, and now I can't install freedom-respecting software onto my Toshiba, at least not through the conventional means that I've been doing. And this is another problem. I think one of the reasons that freedom-respecting software is not realistic at this point is because, there's no turnkey solution for every single aspect of one's computing life. There's always going to be something that fouls people up. And in my case, Sonar, like I told you, double arrows, full screen magnification. In the virtual machine, even with 2 gigs of RAM, it was sluggish. The text was grainy. There was no font smoothing at all. It's just not practical. Now there is, I'm talking about turnkey solutions here. There is a website called thinkpenguin.org or .com, and let's go to the shop. We could search for, see, they've got everything you need here. They've got printers, they've got keyboards, they've got pretty much everything you need to make a complete system. So let's just go for the sake of it. Let's go to notebook computers, the cheap one. I don't even know what screen size this is. I think it might be a 13 or a 15. In my case, I would need a 17. Here we go, 15.6 inch. I have not seen a 17-inch computer that has completely freedom-respecting software built into it out of the box. And part of the problem is With the 17-inch, you're probably thinking, well, just install GNU on the system. Personally, I can do that. Personally, I could probably take a weekend and get it working. But that's just me, and I'm a guy who's passionate about the technology. For people that are not, which happen to be the majority of people, they're going to take one look at this and say, Wi-Fi is not working. Who do I call for support? What's the big box store that I call? Do I go to Best Buy? Do I go to Staples? Do you see what I mean? And as a result, it's the other thing is it can't just be the consumer that pushes, because a lot of times the businesses will say, fine, you're fired. The businesses pretty much wield the power these days. And if you're not willing to do as they please, you can pretty much lose your job. As a result, if they're using Microsoft Windows, you got to use what they use, no matter what. And a lot of people will say, well, why don't we get together, band together, and tell them about freedom respecting software? We go back to point one. I didn't grow up with freedom respecting software. I didn't grow up in the period where software was freely distributed. I've always used proprietary software, again, without even realizing it until the last 7 years. That's the problem, is awareness. And you could tell people about it till you're blue in the face, but you can lead a horse to water, but you can't make them drink. And a lot of people need Windows to get their work done. They need Windows to put food on the table. That's why I think that while freedom respecting software is certainly a good, it's got good ideals, and if people were willing to work hard enough, we could make it happen. But the question is, are they willing to work hard enough? And I think that at this point, I don't know. I honestly don't know. But I do know this, that for the moment, freedom respecting software for the average consumer is not realistic. There are just too many hurdles for the average person to go through to get a system working. And if you need to run proprietary software to get food on your table, well, you're in an even bigger bind. A lot of people, Dr. Stallman in particular would say, ditch your work, find other work. Again, what kind of work is there these days that doesn't in some way utilize the computer? Even our manufacturing processes are electronically driven. And maybe those computers do run GNU+Linux. But in order to maintain those systems, you pretty much have to have an IT degree. And there are a lot of people out there with IT degrees, but there are a lot more people who don't have them. So I just feel like freedom respecting software is just not realistic. What do you guys think? Thank you for watching. Comments are welcome, and have a nice day.